Jessica. How are you today?
Good morning, Donna. Thank you. I'm doing great. A little chilly, but I'm good.
Yeah, me too. So, hello, everyone. I just wanted to say hello and good morning. Today, I'm here with Jessica Idelman, and she is a nutritionist, and she's going to be helping us learn some things about how to eat, what to eat, maybe some circadian scheduling type things. But I'm so excited. Like, I've really been thinking about this all week having you here because, like, food to me is medicine, and we are not talking about it enough. So I'd like to introduce you to Jessica. Jessica, I'd like to just tell a little bit about what you do, who you are.
Sure. Um, Thank you, Donna, for inviting me to have this talk with you today. So my name is Jessica Idelman. I reside in St. Louis, more locally, South City, St. Louis. I am originally from Missouri, came over here from Springfield, Missouri about 7 years ago, which is where I started nutrition. I started doing health coaching down there around 2008. And then whenever I came over to St. Louis, graduated into some more in-depth nutrition programs. And now I am one of only 3 people in Missouri that is board certified by the National Association of Nutrition Professionals. It's a very large board certifying institution in the country. It's been around since 1986, I believe. Um, and it's a pretty big deal. I'm very honored to be among that elite group. It was a lot of work to get there. And in doing that, one of the things that I do on the side outside of nutrition counseling is I'm working with a group. I co-founded a nonprofit in Missouri called the Missouri Nutrition Alliance, and we have a 2-part mission where we try to educate other nutrition professionals, health coaches, and nutrition professionals in the state about scope of practice. If you are not a registered dietitian, that is not information that is readily available. I'm not a registered dietitian, and most health coaches are not either, but they are still highly educated and individualized in terms of their education on certain things that dietitians are not necessarily educated on. And so we do different things, and the public doesn't really know that, doesn't really have a lot of, distinguishing, the ability to distinguish the differences between these different groups. So we formed the M&A about almost 2 years ago. And part of that was in an effort to get some of the laws changed in Missouri. So what do we do on one side of the M&A is advocate for legislation that not only will allow non registered dietitians to practice safely in Missouri without penalty. We also, on the other side, do community outreach with our members, our health coaches and our M&A members.
Nice.
To really get out there into the community and teach real food education.
So you are really super focused on, one, helping patients
Yes.
and people achieve wellness through the foods they eat, and two, really trying to help your profession leak into all the different avenues in Missouri, sounds like.
Right. So yeah, health coaches in general are not part of the healthcare model, this allopathic model that exists today that we know in conventional medicine. And in some ways they do, but in most ways they're not. And that's not a bad thing. We don't necessarily, that's why we're not registered dietitians. We don't want to be licensed or a part of an establishment. That we want to be a part of innovating, right? So in there's problems that come with that though. So we're trying to address those problems, trying to create unity in the sector, so because we all do different things, but we all kind of are in the same category.
Well, I kind of feel like that's a lot like we have, MDs, we have PAs, we have NPs, we have MAs, like we have this whole different avenue of different kind of providers that you can see now. And, we're all trying to figure out like, what is our one thing? So it kind of sounds like you're really just trying to help what you do really solidify in the whole healthcare arena. And, I think to that point is we need an element of nutrition. We have doctors and nurse practitioners, and me included, 18 years as a nurse practitioner, providing healthcare to patients, providing medication, providing education.
Mhm.
More times than not, we're not. I mean, statistically speaking, when they looked at studies about how much providers really are educating or counseling patients, it's like 3%. So it's
Right.
really super low. So then we meet people like you, or I met you, and I'm like, nutrition is like the key to wellness.
It
So
really is.
can you speak a little bit to how do you help people? Like, like I sit across from patients, they're drinking 2 liters of soda, two-liter soda bags. They have refrigerators next to their beds. They think a whole bag of chips is one serving. And so they come into your office and it's like, okay, now what? Now what do you do? How will you help that?
Well, that is a good question, and that is a great question to align with the concept of how we do things differently than say a registered dietitian. So technically, if you're not a licensed practitioner, you're not a clinician, right? So what we do is not medical nutrition therapy, or at least it shouldn't be. What we do is try to really connect with a client. We don't call them patients, we call them clients, at least I do.
Yeah,
And
that's my old school.
yeah, sure. Yeah, and try to find out what's not working. So it really is a client-centered counseling approach where you come to that person and meet them where they are, right? So I've worked with very educated clients, and I've also worked with people who are just like the people that you mentioned, where they have absolutely no guidance or thought processes that go into what they're eating. They're just eating what they like. And we know that, I mean, it's very clear, about 90% of our food supply is ultra processed or super processed. It's processed, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not, maybe it's not 90% that's super processed, but we know that 80% of what's at the grocery store is not even real food, right? So
Yeah, well, I've even heard that they're genetically, like
it
I don't know where I was last year, and they were talking about an apple, and they took the apple seed
right.
and they genetically remodified it so that the apple could sit on the shelf longer without getting brown. And I thought, oh my gosh, do we need that? I mean, is there something wrong with the apple just the way it is? And I think, isn't that what happened with gluten too, with the wheat?
Oh yeah, they've done some terrible things to gluten. It's not it's not the gluten's fault what's happened to gluten, that it's so inflammatory now. It's what we've done to it. And that's the kind of information that I feel I'm responsible for sharing.
Yeah.
So I don't, it's, some people do, nutrition professionals will, tell people eat this, not that. Here is what you should be eating every single day for every single week, that kind of thing. I don't do that. What I do is start with people's preferences,
Right.
and then we start with food education. So if we're talking about someone, like an example of someone like you mentioned a few moments ago,
Mhm.
then food education is in great need. And we start from the ground up, right? So we start with things like label reading, and label reading, it comes is part and parcel with understanding things like what happens to gluten when it's the agricultural system, the model in this country anyway, and how that impacts our food quality, and how that trickles down into an inflammatory response into the body. So that's my job, to sort of walk them through, even metaphorically, if that is
Yeah.
needed, so
I
they
mean,
can understand
I
fully.
think very few people realize what gluten really does and some
Right.
of the autoimmune deficiencies that are branded with that. I know
Yeah.
like thyroid is, what else? Is there other things that are kind of hooked to gluten as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's anything that starts in the gut is gonna, it's gonna sprawl out into all kinds of other problems, spectrum issues, depending on your genetic predispositions to things. So, gluten is an inflammatory in the gut, on that cellular level, the epithelial cell, the wall of the gut lumen.
Mm.
Um, with, I've seen research where this affects everybody, even in healthy people. It
I bet.
doesn't mean you're going to get thyroid disease as a healthy person because you eat gluten every once in a while. And that's the difference. I don't want someone to be afraid of making choices that they are that they're deeply aligned with from a generational cultural standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't ever want someone I don't ever want to tell someone they can never eat gluten again, unless of course they're celiac, then we have to be a little bit more serious than that. But
Yeah.
my job is to get them to understand things like that, like what actually happens to the body whenever you're eating gluten, cheap, ultra processed, bleached flour, non-organic products every single day, right?
Yeah.
We know that one piece of white bread is going to spike it's going to spike your insulin more than table sugar will, straight up table sugar, right? So those kinds of things, like when we're talking, whenever I would be, if I were talking to a diabetic or something, someone in that category, that's something that I want people to understand, that it's much more,
Mm.
it's, the complexities of these things and how those complexities or those nuances in health can change. If we get healthy, we can have gluten and we can upgrade, right? So we can have
Right.
organic, sourdough or a sprouted grain bread or something like that every once in a while and feel good about that decision instead of being determined to make these, to stay in our rut, right?
I've done a lot of diet education over the years. Like there was a year when I was like writing down how many pounds each person lost. Like I just would get like so excited about it because like it's a big deal to me
Hmm.
because I think that weight loss is really life altering and people always feel better.
Right.
But it really starts with, really assessing what you're eating to begin with. And,
Absolutely.
like going through the list and circling, like, is any of that have any value to it? I think I was reading yesterday something like we need 10 cups of vegetables a day. And I was looking at that like, there is no way there's no way I get that like at
most,
all.
most people don't. Yeah.
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 So how do you feel about vegetables in general? Like I think about
I
them as the
I think about
vitamin.
them every day.
You what?
I think about them every day. I like vegetables. I
You,
encourage people to eat them.
yeah.
But going back to that preferences thing, there are some foods that people don't want to eat, right? And they're never going to get there and they don't want to get there. And starting in a place where you're meeting a client where they are in terms of that, like if someone doesn't want to eat Brussels sprouts, I'm not going to make them eat Brussels sprouts. I'm not their mommy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what I will do is try to, and first let's give an example of why we would recommend something like Brussels sprouts. Let's say somebody has estrogen related dysfunction, right? They're not, maybe they have estrogen overload. They are, breast cancer survivor, something in that category, right? Maybe they have PCOS. So foods in the cruciferous family are going to be really great for helping people to metabolize estrogen, excess estrogen, right? But if they don't like Brussels sprouts, it's not my job to, no, 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 you have to eat your Brussels sprouts. It's my job to first understand why they don't like Brussels sprouts. Maybe it's because they have some trauma related to that from childhood, right? Where their mother wouldn't let them get up from the table until they finished their overcooked canned Brussels sprouts.
People don't realize how many of those things from childhood
It's
really
it's
affect
it's
their
very
diet.
common,
Yeah,
right? It's
even
very
nutrition.
common.
How we
So
look at food, I think, really begins when we're young.
yeah,
And I think that's
absolutely,
why so
absolutely.
many people have gotten into bad food issues just because, maybe nobody was even caring about what they ate or even watching what they were eating. And maybe everybody was just eating. And there's that part of food that is familial or, oh, I feel so good with
Hmm.
my family.
Nostalgic.
I just,
Yeah.
yeah, nostalgic is a better word, but yeah. So it sounds like when you're working with patients, you're kind of looking at what if they have like pre-diabetes, or maybe they have blood pressure problems or cancer or whatever. And then you're being very specific orientated to that diagnosis as to how to further help patients heal.
Well, yes. I mean, that is what we're categorically supposed to be doing. We're not clinicians. We're not.
Right.
Um, I don't tell people to eat this over that. I basically give them the education about, something like, again, like going back to gluten is a good example about what this gluten over here looks like and how we can upgrade to this over here, and what eliminating it for a few weeks or a few months first could mean before introducing, reintroducing an upgraded version of that food, that inflammatory food, back into your life. I mean, it can heal people leaps and bounds, not just gluten, but just the whole moving all these pieces together, right? And like the Brussels sprout example, trying to understand why they have an aversion to that particular food. Maybe it is something from, an association that they developed very early in childhood that they're not even really aware of, connecting the dots to. Mm-hmm. So, beets are a good example. People who don't like beets have never had a good beet.
I don't understand beets. Can you tell me something good about beets? I know how good they are for you. Right. And like yesterday I bought beet juice. I'm going to buy some beet juice, but what the heck?
If we, canned sauerkraut, canned beets, canned Brussels sprouts, things that we in the 80s and the 90s were growing up eating out of cans aren't going to taste good. And also those things like canned beets, you take a very nutritious food like a beet and you put it in boiling water, you leach all the nutrients out, then you dump that water down the drain. And you're going to have a pretty anemic, lackluster tasting beet. So whenever we find those, we follow the path back down to the past of why someone has an association with this food, then if we can modify how that food is prepared or how they're reintroduced into that with that food, they can change their opinion about that and reintroduce.
I don't know. I don't think my mom ever cooked a beet. Like, how do you cook a beet?
Donna,
I was just at the grocery store. I was just at the grocery store yesterday, and I'm staring at that beet, thinking, and I'm just looking at it, thinking, well, what do you do with it exactly? And that lasted for about 30 seconds, and I was like, oh, I'm over that. And then I just went to the beet juice and picked up some beet juice instead.
Yeah, we are in, I think, a third full generation of people who came of age, grew up in households where they were not real food was not prepared for them. Boxes, pre-prepared packaged food, convenience foods, when they started being introduced in the 50s with the microwave and slowly transitioned into all of these pre-packaged things and canned goods and things like that, we just departed from our food culture, right? That we had as far back as early, ancient civilizations as Native Americans. We all have ancient food cultures and around the world, fermented products, fermented foods is a good example. To answer your question about a beet, the way that I prepare beets, and I used to hate them as well, dislike them as well. I always grew up with those jarred or pickled beets. They were gross. They're disgusting. Yeah. I get the beet bulb and I will leave the skin on and I will bake it like a baked potato in the oven. 400 degrees, I wrap it up in aluminum foil and for about an hour at 400.
I'm going to write this down. 400,
and then
1 hour baked in the oven.
Yeah, baked in the oven like a baked potato. So wrap it up in aluminum foil. And normally I don't like to use aluminum foil with my food, but this is coming into contact with the outer skin of the beet that we rub off later.
Okay.
So it's safe. It's safe. Okay. So there's really no great replacement for that in the oven setting and to dry roast something like a beet. Otherwise it gets all shriveled up and dried looking. So so dry roasting it for an hour at 400. And then after it's cool, you just run it under cold water and you sort of just push the skin away with your thumb. Or if you have to, you would get a potato peeler. Okay. And then you have a perfectly cooked beet and it's delicious. I like to eat them with goat cheese or some kind of a sheep's milk cheese, feta, something like that. Goes great with beets and arugula.
Is it salt and pepper?
So if you want salt and pepper, I don't need salt and pepper on a beet, but I will cut it up and put it on a beautiful salad with just arugula, some olive oil, some lemon juice, some feta or goat cheese or something like that. It's great. It's delicious.
Try it. I'm going to. I'm going to. I'm like, I know exactly where I saw that yesterday. I'm going to go back and get it. My kids will be home this weekend and, my daughter's coming home this weekend and tomorrow night we're doing like this little sleepover thing. So I'll just pop one of those in the oven and everybody will get to taste that and I'll send you how it went.
I'd like to get some feedback on what everybody's opinion of the roasted beet is.
My husband's pretty open to new things. I mean, we've started making pizza boats out of zucchini, which is a healthier way to have pizza, and like, trying to be a little more creative about getting away from the gluten, because he has thyroid issues, and one of my kids has a gluten issue too. So we like trying to figure out different ways to make food that people like. I never did anything with the zucchini before. I never really liked them. But then the zucchini bowl, my daughter actually turned me on to that. I was like, that's pretty good. Or the spaghetti squash. I never ever bought a spaghetti squash in my whole life. And then I was like, well, we should try it.
I just discovered Hearts of Palm pasta. It's delicious. Are you familiar with Hearts of Palm?
No.
It's very retro.
It's so silly. Like you're talking about a food, and I'm like, what is that?
Hearts of Palm is not very. It's not very well known in the Midwest. It's more of a Southern thing. Speaking of canned goods, I always had it at my aunt introduced it to me, who lived in South Carolina. She'd always put Hearts of Palm on salad or things like that. Kind of reminds me of those little, just those retro foods that nobody, kind of like canned beets, that nobody really wants to know about or care about. But I saw some I think some products call it palmini. There was a pasta product at Trader Joe's I saw a couple weeks ago. Bought it, sat in my pantry forever, and I roasted a leg of lamb a couple nights ago. And this Hearts of Palm it's a very neutral flavor, and it kind of just absorbs a flavor, like a sauce or a flavor in a sauce really well. And you don't really need to cook it. It doesn't need to cook. It just comes. It already comes the way because of its fibrous. It's a vegetable. The way that it comes, it's just already ready to go. So anyway, I just added those noodles to the jus, or the drippings from the leg of lamb, and served them on the side with some sauerkraut, and it was delicious. It was amazing. So good that I'm like looking for more out here in Kentucky.
You're like, we're gonna make that again. I think
we have to make it again.
Yeah. So speaking to like I know sauerkraut is supposed to be one of those things that are really good. Is that kind of the sauerkraut, onion, that kind of family because of the probiotics, or?
Sauerkraut is a member of the cruciferous family as well. It's cabbage. It's fermented cabbage. And when you ferment a food, and sauerkraut is a particularly interesting one in terms of making a food medicinal, you really catapult it into a completely different category of nutrition. And every plant is different. Every vegetable is different. Sauerkraut is one of those really remarkable foods. Yes, probiotics for sure. Real sauerkraut. So canned goods go through a pasteurization process after they're canned. So everything that's alive will die, right? No, there's no chance of survival. And that's why that's another food that I grew up just absolutely hating.
Yeah. We had it all the time because we have kind of a German heritage.
Yeah, same. But today, having naturally, lacto fermented sauerkraut is a gift, because not only is it delicious, it is a digestive aid when you're eating something like a high protein meal. And sauerkraut specifically, it goes very, very well with lamb. I mean, it is a very snappy flavor combination. So
yeah. So do you buy it in the bag? You buy it in the glass jar? You said no, not to canned.
I prefer to find fermented products that are sold in glass jars. There are some real fermented products that are sold in plastic bags. I tend to stay away from those because of the
plastic.
Right.
And the plastic has to do with estrogen, is that right?
Right. There's phytoestrogens in plastic, especially that get especially profound whenever they're heated. But I just try to avoid them anyway. I mean, they're not great for the environment, so I just try to avoid them altogether. Yeah. The brand the sauerkraut brand that I really enjoy, and there's several brands of sauerkraut. I really like Bubby's.
Bubby's.
Yeah,
Bubby's has something else too. I think they have some
Bubby's
other
makes lots of
products.
stuff.
Yeah, I've
They
heard of
have
that.
lots of
I've heard of
lacto
Bubby's
fermented stuff.
before. I'm sorry.
They make lots of lacto fermented stuff. They've got great pickles. They have green tomatoes. They make a fabulous beet horseradish.
Maybe it was some kind of beet. Bubby's beets.
They
Maybe
could
it
be
was
beets.
that.
They could have the pickled beets. I haven't seen pickled beets around here, but they I know they have a full line of fermented products.
Yeah, can you speak to the aluminum?
You mean inside cans?
Well, just aluminum and not cooking with it, and you know, like.
Yeah, it's an easy metal to transfer from something like sheet aluminum or cookware or something like that into your food. And we get a lot of exposure to aluminum from the environment anyway. It is something that we can detoxify, but we do that slowly. And just like any heavy metal, it can really muck up the way that we, the way that everything works, really, right? Like, you know that. So
well, I never thought about, like, until I went to my first functional medicine thing, I never thought about how I stored my food in plastic. I never thought about what kind of pans I was using to cook with. I never thought about aluminum. I mean, we use that for everything. And now recently, I was just on the phone with somebody from one of the Genova doctors, and she's like, yeah, you shouldn't be barbecuing because of the barbecuing.
Oh, no. Oh yeah, no, yeah.
We barbecue everything. I'm like, well, what's wrong with barbecue?
So this is what my major is, right? This is the kind of stuff that when you talk, whenever I'm working with a client, I want to find out about in order to help them understand. It's not about shaming them or telling, no, everything you're doing is bad and wrong. It's really just about educating, because I mean, Donna, you probably learned how to barbecue from your parents who had no idea that that black char that is on food that we think is so tasty is also straight up carcinogen, right? Like those carcinogens in on blackened meat are so cancerous and cancer forming. I mean, they're extremely inflammatory. It's one of the most inflammatory things you can put in your body.
Is that any kind of barbecuing?
Right. Any blackening that you would get from like something charred, which is another, one of the ways that doesn't mean you can't use a barbecue. It just means that the way you gauge a cooked food is going to be different, right? So something can be cooked and not blackened or charred. And one of the ways we avoid that is through how we understand fat and how fat works, because fat is what's going to help char. Well, protein too, but when those proteins get broken down, chemically speaking, they get broken down whenever they reach a certain heat. They have a heat tolerance, as does fat, and they change chemically whenever they reach that certain heat point. So after that, not only are they not nutritious, they're extremely inflammatory once they're in the body. It's a huge burden to put overcooked fat, overcooked protein in the body from just an inflammatory standpoint, right?
So what would be your recommendation for barbecuing? Just not do it at all, or?
Well, it depends. So
my husband's got a green egg and he's like crazy about that green egg.
We have a gas grill. We grill things all the time. It's just that I do certain things to protect the food, and cook in certain things. Like, for example, cast iron. I cook on a lot of cast iron on the grill. So I have cast iron skillets of all sizes, and I will protect my food that way. I'll sometimes preheat the cast iron in a grill so it gets wicked hot, and then I'll put the food on that. So it's kind of protecting it from flame.
Nice. Well, that's a good tip.
And then I don't use aluminum. I don't recommend using aluminum. I will use parchment paper instead. The only thing I really use aluminum for is to roast a beet.
Okay.
I don't really roast bake potatoes. I I don't think I ever really do that, but if I did, I would probably use aluminum foil for that too. Knowing that I'm not going to eat the outer part of the potato, right?
Yeah.
But
I love the outer part of the potato, so I'm not
I
using
know, I
aluminum.
know. I mean, you can do other things. So one of the things that you can do it's called a salt baked potato. It's a great waste of kosher salt, but it makes a fabulous end product. You put a russet, because is it russet that you bake, or do you using
Yeah.
russets? You put you put the russet potatoes in a casserole dish, and you fill it 3/4 of the way full with kosher salt, and
Wow.
put them in the oven for a very long time at really high heat. So like 450 for maybe an hour or something like that. And it makes a very creamy potato because the salt will pull out the moisture from the potato to the
Oh, I might
skin.
have to try that. These are fun tips.
Yeah, yeah. I have a background in a lot of culinary um, background. Worked in restaurants in college, and my mother is still a caterer, was, at one point. Just have a lot of experience working in a restaurant type setting and understanding the culinary aspects
Food.
of how we prepare foods properly. And then whenever I became interested in nutrition, could see all the things wrong, could see all these things wrong, like these horrifying things, like smoking oil in a pan before you add something, like all of the like Food Network chefs do. I'm like, like it's, it's terrifying to see all the big food
Why is
crimes that
that
are committed.
bad?
Oh, but well, again, going back to the fat, the way we chemically change a food, if you wait until your oil is smoking in a pan, you have chemically damaged, altered that oil, that fat, and then you're cooking your food in it.
Huh.
So it basically becomes rancid is not exactly the right word, but you're turning it into something extremely inflammatory and in no way helpful from a nutrition standpoint. So if using something like a beautiful olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, to saute something, and you're waiting for it to get so hot before you add food, that is you're ruining the olive oil completely, not just from a nutrition standpoint, but also the flavor. The flavor will change. So it is a low to medium smoke point oil, and you want to use, I personally don't advocate for sauteing or cooking with high heat for anything really. Slow and low if you're cooking meat, but just because of what even a high smoke point oil, like a saturated fat like beef tallow or lard, even those fats have a smoke point, and they will begin to break down and chemically change, which takes them from a very nutritious food. If you're talking about a pasture raised animal, the fat from a pasture raised free roaming animal, to a wok, right, where you're you're waiting until it gets so hot before you add the food. You're taking a beautiful food product and turning it into garbage, literally garbage, in a matter of moments.
It's so scary. And I think a lot about what you're saying. It sounds chemically induced, like our food is a chemical. Our body is a chemical. We're made of all these electrons and whatever, and all of those things have to work together nicely. So I had recently done some Genova labs, and one of the tests that I did was for estrogen metabolites, to see if I have a risk for like breast cancer, female cancers and things. And when the marker came back, she started talking about all these foods that I should be eating, not doing anything on the barbecue pit, and foods to add to my diet. And I was just like in shock. Like, what? I thought barbecuing was good. I thought, and then of course she gave me a list of things that I should be doing. There were foods, like some things I hadn't heard of before either, like, different kind of spices or herbs or whatever. I'm like, I mean, you can prevent cancer by eating better or differently, or you can turn your genes off by eating better.
That's right.
Or differently.
I like to look at it more like we can turn our genes on and off, right? I mean, people don't typically like it whenever even licensed providers say that we can turn cancer off, right? By eating a certain way. And I'm not going to say that we can't. I just try to be very careful about,
Yeah.
about the language that we use whenever we're talking to someone. And what you're referring to, that experience that you had, is exactly what most people have. They go to a practitioner, they get a test result or they get a diagnosis, and that practitioner does not know how to actually say, here's how you get from point A to point B. They say,
No.
do this, don't do this, see you in a year. And in between that, people are lost. And all they do, I mean, we are very robotic. We are very
Yeah.
simple in nature, where we just kind of keep, I mean, you've seen this, you've done this, I'm sure, where you keep looking in the same spot for something you're missing.
Yeah.
Something you've lost. It's kind of the same thing with food. Like, we just keep going back to what we learned in the 80s and 90s when we came of age. I don't know how many people, women especially, who will come to me and can't lose weight, are regressing back into an inflammatory disease like rheumatoid arthritis, for example. They're putting on weight, and they just naturally will, their reptilian brain wants them to cut calories, cut fat, and exercise more. And
Yeah.
those are the opposite things you should be doing, whenever you are in a predicament such as that, right? So your body is obviously going to rebel whenever you're not doing the right things. But if we don't have if we don't have the tools, then it's very easy to get on Google and get the wrong information,
Oh,
right?
it's
So,
loaded.
right. So you're just met with consistent overwhelm again and again and again. And hiring somebody who just focuses on the lifestyle piece as it relates to food and nutrition. I mean, we've talked about the process of cooking too. We haven't, it's not just about what you're eating, it's how you're eating it.
Right.
You mentioned circadian rhythm before you hit the record button. It's about when you're eating. It's about, are you putting foods in your body that you are aligned with, right? So it just really, people need more information, and they need to be guided into more of an intuitive sense of awareness about what they want to do, right? It really is about preference for me.
Yeah, I do. I'm a hypnotherapist as well. And so I study a lot of things about the brain. Pretty much we think the same thoughts 95% of today. I'm going to think the same thing that I thought yesterday. So I'm having 5% new thoughts every day. And that's just the nature of the brain, because we like rhythm. We like how things are. We're trying to protect ourselves. And so, but this to me is trying to stimulate people to get thinking about, could it be possible to feel better simply by doing a few things differently?
That's right.
And I agree with you. Like, when somebody comes in, like, I could tell you that you need to be moving and exercising. If you're not, I can tell you you're probably not getting enough water intake. I can tell you, like, to change everything, get off of gluten, eggs and peanuts, and all the dairy. But like, that's a big load to handle. And I think, like you're saying, like, really taking a history and trying to find out, like, what are you doing? And then something that you mentioned was talking a little to the circadian schedule. What's your thoughts about time restricted eating and things like that?
I am a big proponent of time restricted eating. I do notice that people do it wrong a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people will consistently skip breakfast. And again, if they're in a state of, one of the things that's always true with dieting is that, you got to change it up. If you are hitting a wall, if you're plateauing, if you're regressing, if what you're doing isn't working for you, the very first thing that anybody has to embrace is that what I'm doing is not working. It doesn't matter how, dogmatic you want to, a person wants to be about it. It doesn't matter how much you believe in the intermittent fasting idea. Intermittent fasting works, but if it's not working, it's because you're doing it wrong, right? So one of the biggest things that people end up doing with intermittent fasting that ends up putting them back on the line of regression or weight gain or plateauing is they're not switching it up enough. And it just, because it's so easy for people to skip breakfast in the way that we modify our day. That's what people will just do every single day. And the way that the blood sugar or the insulin response, that roller coaster that happens when we spike sugar in the morning, when we spike with our first, no matter what we eat, right? The way that we release insulin. If you're struggling with blood sugar handling and you're trying to skip a meal in the beginning, not only is that very painful, but it puts your, like, it in terms of like, it's a mind trap, right? You're constantly craving, you're always thinking about food, that kind of thing. And that's what happens in the beginning when you don't adjust or you don't modify blood sugar and get that stabilized before you go into an intermittent fasting protocol. When people do that too soon, and then they skip something, even, I mean, breakfast or even dinner, it makes it just much more hard. It's much more difficult to do that. And you feel like you're depriving yourself, and your body does too, which is why your metabolism will slow down and those kinds of things. So it really is about, again, it's about just providing people with information. I don't want to tell people what to do. I want to give them the information and really promote or help them, support them, make those decisions for themselves. Because when you're the one making the decision and it's working, that is a tremendous motivator. Yeah. And it changes everything in terms of your momentum for making a long-term change. The circadian rhythm thing is definitely a thing. Like, it's not just about, stop eating after 6:30 or something like that, or 3 or 4 hours before bed, which, by the way, is a big deal whenever it comes to how much we can restore when we sleep. But it's also about seasonal eating too. So, so whenever we are in sync with the seasons, and we know about that, and we can honor that even just a little bit more than we were before, it can make a huge difference.
So speaking to that, that would be like in the winter time, you're eating the winter foods.
Correct. Well, you're eating what's in season, and what's in season in the fall and the winter are typically more animal-based, animal-centered foods. And not everybody, I'm practically a vegan in midsummer. By the time we hit summer solstice, I don't want to eat meat. And it's not like I'm trying to be a vegan. I don't do well with dairy, so that's easy. And I just really don't want to eat animals. So I tend to just kind of gravitate towards being plant-based or even vegan forward. But by the time I get to November, I can tell that I need to start eating meat again. And so I do. And so it's not about, like, I'm not going to be spiritually enlightened by being a vegan while my hair's falling out, right? Like, like, it's one of those things, like, I'm just going to do what my body's asking for. And then, come springtime, I'm going to start craving all of the roughage, right? All the things that you see outside, the lettuces, the fresh herbs, those things, just thinking about them will make our mouth water. And that is a sign that your body is ready for those things. So that's seasonal eating is a really big part of understanding how to be in sync with our bodies. We so much want this body to be an extension of us, or we want to be in control of it. And we're not. Who has said it? Michelle, my friend Michelle, said this the other day in a meme on Instagram. We are not our bodies. We're not our bodies. We are in our bodies, right? So honoring our bodies as if we are there. It is our home. I mean, what do you do with your own home? Do you clean it whenever it is dirty? Do you give it a fresh look when you're bored with the way that it looks? That kind of thing. Like, you can use that as a metaphor for how we eat too. Yeah. And we do things, we open up windows in the spring in our house, and we clean the air, and we cook different foods, and we rearrange the furniture and put in different art, those kinds of things. Sometimes we just move. It's the same thing with our bodies. We can renovate our bodies, but we don't have to do it in this very this very narrow way that we've been taught so far, where it's calories in, calories out, and eat 100 grams of protein a day. It doesn't have to be that way. We can apply a different level of understanding in order for it to make it work a little bit better for us.
Yeah, I think one of the things I really struggle with is changing it up. Like, we pretty much have the same things all the time, over and over. And I think that's because like I'm always afraid to buy something and then it's stuck in the refrigerator and I don't use it. And then I'm like, oh, so yeah, I guess many people are like that too. I
Oh
think
yeah,
it goes right back to that, having the
everybody
same
is.
thought and being routine and doing the same thing today I did yesterday. And yeah.
I mean, even I end up throwing bags of lettuce in the trash. It's, we're all human and we do those things. And have you, again, like a level of consciousness for me whenever I throw a bag of lettuce in the trash that wasn't even ever opened was, why did I buy that? Is it this time of year that I'm not wanting that, I'm not gravitating towards that, so I'm not going to buy that again for a
I
while.
don't like lettuce in the winter. Like I eat hardly any salads in the winter, and it's weird because I will buy the salad stuff thinking I'm going to eat it, and then it sits there and I have no clue why I have no, like I don't want to eat that at
Yeah,
all. And that's
everybody
funny.
does
That's
it.
interesting. I never really thought about that. And then I'm like,
Yeah,
is it because I'm sick of them or what? I just, yeah. But I'm
yeah,
in the
it's
spring and
good
the
to change
summer.
it up.
Yeah.
It's good to change it up. And we also know from the microbiome perspective, we know that as the more diversity in our diet that we have, the more diverse our microbiome is going to be, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Taking a probiotic on keto is not nearly the same thing as eating 30 different kinds of plants in a week, right? And
Yeah.
that takes that requires a lot of energy, a lot of mental energy to change your thought processes, because everybody knows that it's much easier and efficient to just eat the same 5 things every day.
Yeah.
But right, but we get our bodies eventually are like, but we don't like that, right? So
Yeah. And I think speaking just to one of the things you said too is having a variety of foods, changing the foods up every day. The stuff that I read about that is then you're getting different kinds of nutrients. And
that's right.
what you're saying, I think, is it also helps the gut biome to be changing. So like we don't have the same breakfast every day. So like, I don't know, like I did a food allergy panel, and when it came back from Genova, it said, only have bananas on Mondays and Fridays and lemons every other day. Well, because I had an upregulated sensitivity to them. And they're like, you can still
Oh,
eat
I
them.
see.
You can still eat them, but you
Right.
need to spread them out so that you're not eating them every day, which is what actually increases the sensitivity to certain foods.
Correct.
So, I mean, I thought that was pretty helpful, but I don't follow it very well because I like to have a smoothie every day with a banana in it. And I like lemon water. So, I mean, it's that habit.
It
But
is.
I get like when I looked at the paper and I looked at the report for probably 6 months, I was doing pretty good, like, mixing it up and, so it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it is part of the challenge of food education to introduce yourself to new things. Nobody, not it's a rare breed of person who wants to eat or try new foods, especially whenever they're in advanced adulthood, right? Like they want efficiency. They want models of efficiency, right? Like put me on a diet, give me a meal plan. I don't do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to educate you, and I'm going to put the ball in your court in terms of what is going to work for you and what do you already know you should be doing differently. Let's start there. And whenever it comes to diversity, it's not about, lacking the lemon water every morning because you like it. It's about trying something different that you might find you like more or better or differently, right? So it's kind of it's referred to as the crowding out method. Instead of saying, no, you can't have that, we say, why don't you try this first and see if you like it? And if you don't like that, let's tweak it a little bit. Maybe you like it now. And that, those are the kinds of things that, to me, I mean, I am one of those rare breeds. I think it's fun to try new things, especially whenever it comes to like what you just mentioned about food allergies. And, we get, just like our body, if you keep doing the same exercise over and over again, it stops working. You plateau. The muscle plateaus. It becomes efficient at responding to that trauma, and it doesn't break down anymore, right? So it's the same thing with the digestive system. You're putting the same microbes in the gut. Your body gets really good at digesting them very quickly, and then you get hungrier faster because you've gotten really good at digesting the same meal that you eat for breakfast every single day. So you're hungry earlier than you would be normally, right? And that's just one thing. When you're switching up the diversity, you're also, because of those microbes exist in the gut, a byproduct of that is creating a subset of enzymes to help break down that food. So with certain microbes also come certain enzymes, and enzymes are magic makers, like from all different kinds of perspectives, right? So the diversity thing is interesting. And whenever you can motivate someone from that perspective, then they can try something else, right? Like I'm never going to like liver ever, but I know it's good for me. So after trying many different kinds of liver, many different ways, I decided that I would just be best taking a liver supplement, like a desiccated liver supplement. And I'm good with that. But I still am going to eat pate when I go to France, right?
I have sardines in my closet, and I've had them there for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what else? Like, so
I'm going to have those for lunch today. At least open them and
sardines
slip on
are
them.
so delicious.
Huh?
I remember sardines are really delicious when you're in Sardinia, but the kind of sardines that I can get at Trader Joe's make me want to barf, right? Like they're not, I don't think they're good.
Like
but
all the big functional medicine guys, like every conference are talking about those darn sardines.
I know. Yeah. They are very good.
I should try them.
Yeah. Instead, I like to put anchovy paste in. I like to rub anchovy paste on lamb before I roast it, or I'll make a classic Caesar dressing with anchovies or something like that. Like it's not enough, but it's something. And those are the kinds of things like we don't have to abandon.
I'm writing anchovies down. I'm not ignoring you.
Yeah, anchovy paste is way easier to deal with than anchovies.
So I don't even know if we've ever really ate a leg of lamb.
Oh yeah, I've been preparing a lot of lamb this winter because it's easy to find grass pasture raised at Trader Joe's and Aldi.
Really, Aldi's?
Yeah, my husband's been buying it here in Kentucky. He's been buying it at Aldi, and then when I'm in St. Louis, I'll buy it at Trader Joe's. Those kind, I'll be sick of it by spring.
Yeah, well then you'll be changing over to your new food group.
Right. Right.
Well, I guess in summary, you've given us a ton of things to think about. A lot of times when people are thinking about food, they just want to talk food, but like we've really kind of done a big circle here, talking about food allergies, gut biome, talking about the ways that we cook things, foods as medicine, using food and looking at it in different cooking. We've talked about changing the food around by seasons, depending on what season these things grow in, makes it better to eat them in that. And then looked at the times that we eat and the circadian schedules. So I think that's a lot.
These are all some of my favorite topics.
I love them too.
Surprisingly, most of my clients don't want to talk about this kind of stuff. They want to talk about just tell me what to eat and how much of it I'm supposed to eat, right?
I know.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's not the point. Like,
doggone it. Yeah, I know. I feel the same way. Just tell me, like, I'm gonna try a couple of these things. I'm gonna do the hearts of palm, the anchovy.
Oh yeah.
And then make some beets in the oven. I'm gonna try those 3 things. So
are you gonna go to Trader Joe's sometime soon?
I could do that.
I don't know if they get the seasonal items, so I don't know if they still have the hearts of palm pasta, but if they do, you should definitely check it out. It's so easy. You don't even have to cook it. You just rinse it. And if you don't like the flavor, you can soak it in like in a milk type product, like cow milk or even coconut milk, and it will neutralize the flavor even more.
Huh.
I mean, I don't mind the flavor, but my point is that you don't have to cook it. That's as much preparation as it requires. Okay. You would just have to heat it up in whatever sauce you're using.
I'm going to try some of these things. This is very exciting. Like, yeah, I got to try something.
Let me know how it goes, especially with that beet.
I'm going to do the beet. I'm going to go get a beet because that's close. I can run right up there and get a beet. Trader Joe's is a little bit on, it's way on the other side of town for me, but.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So how do people find you if they want to work with you, and give them some information about maybe your values and
Sure. There's a couple different ways that you can, anybody can reach me. If someone's a practitioner, what's that?
Yeah,
you're more, yeah. Yeah, if someone's a practitioner, that is my website. It's my name, jessicaidelman.com. And my number, that's a Springfield area code, but I do live in St. Louis. I work with people from all over, but that's why it's a 417 area code. They can also find me through the Missouri Nutrition Alliance. There's a directory there. And if you're a practitioner in Missouri, I would love to talk to you anyway. We are always looking to grow our members, not just any member, but members who are dedicated to the values and the mission that we have behind the M&A, giving back to the community, practicing with the utmost professionalism. That's how we're going to get the laws changed. And also unifying the sector. That's how we market ourselves the best, right? Like most of the consumer market around what we do is confused about what we do, which was why this conversation was so great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think they're very confused about what everybody's doing.
Right,
I think as of, I'll say, oh, functional medicine, people are like, well, what is that exactly?
Right.
And I even have a hard time explaining because we got integrative medicine, we got Western medicine, we got functional medicine, we got holistic medicine.
Yeah,
and,
it's very confusing.
Yeah.
And what the M&A, what we want to do with the M&A is really unite the sector, and not just the sector around nutrition and health coaching, but also our partners. We have a full array of partners all over the state who also know their scope of practice. If they do not focus on nutrition, they know that they're supposed to refer that out. They're not just prescribing supplements without looking at what the real problem is. If the real problem is behavior and education,
right,
then that is what we do. That's our scope. That's what our we can educate on supplements, on how to. It's another thing that I do is make sure that my clients know how to advocate for themselves, how to look at a supplement that's being recommended by their practitioner and make sure that it's the best possible one for them at that price point. So it's just things like that. Like we want to collect more practitioners because, the more we have who are standing up and taking this pledge that says, I know my scope and this is what we do, the less confused our communities are.
Yeah.
And the more successful we are, not just with our careers, but also changing the way that people are living and being healthy.
Yeah.
Which is the most important thing.
Yes, it is. At the end of the day, like that's what God put me on this earth to do, is help people get healthy.
That's
and
right.
Part of this conversation is because I care, and I care that people don't know the truth about things. I care because I don't know why. I'm so driven by it. It's
I'm
crazy.
with you,
I don't
Donna.
even know where it comes from, but I know. Like every time I talk about it, I get so freaking excited. Like, yes, like we could live to 100 and be healthy at 100.
If only we had the right information.
Yeah. And, I'm big into movement and exercise and all that kind of stuff too. But I do think the very first thing really has to begin with our diet and what we're putting in our body, because it's the base of what your body is. Like every one of those cells inside that food affects a cell inside of your body. And then that affects another cell in the body and another cell. And then pretty soon, based on what you ate, you become it.
That's right. That's right.
So, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. This was really fun.
I know it is so much fun. Anybody that's looking for me, I'm at donnanauman.com and I'm on Facebook. My Facebook group is Journey of You. I would love to have you there because that's where this is going to be going.
Haven't I joined? Or are you talking to you're talking
I'm just talking to everybody. Yeah, because like that is my platform for trying to get people healthy. And that's where this video will be. It'll be on my Journey of You Facebook page. But it's really just about educating, helping people. Like at the end of the day,
make better decisions.
I can sell you on my services right now. I just want to sell you on being happy and healthy. Of course, I want you to do our services, but yeah. So anyway, thank you so much. You've been a blessing to us all. The information is invaluable. As many conferences as I have been to, I still I took a bunch of notes today, and
I love that.
I know.
That's a wonderful compliment, Donna. Thank you.
I know. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you soon.